Welcome to Shawn and Carter Have a Podcast. My name is Shawn.
And I'm Carter.
And we will be sprinting through this as we are making up lost time, but we don't have that much time.
Exactly. We're going to be gazelles on this one.
And we want to sum up some of the things that we've noticed about Machete Order, and we've watched some parodies of Star Wars over the past week. I gotta say, doing the homework for this week was the most fun homework I've ever done. I watched the entire Family Guy trilogy and the entire Robot Chicken trilogy in preparation.
That's awesome.
It was so awesome.
I'm working from memory on a lot of that. So
a lot of it you're going to remember because they're just making fun of the same things everyone else is, but there were so many little things that I was like, they're geniuses. They're so smart.
So smart. So smart. I love the Robot Chicken parody. I think it's my favorite of all of them. The last one.
I love the character of the Emperor in Robot Chicken. It's done by Seth MacFarlane, which makes the Family Guy Robot Chicken circle pretty tight, but he is just hysterical.
I might watch that tonight while I'm doing some work because their Revenge of the Sith one is all about the Emperor. It's like an 80s hero, like high school hero story told from the point of view of the Emperor, which I love.
With an awful lot of Breckenmeyer as Boba Fett, which is also a plus.
Oh, it's just genius. Just genius.
Okay, so we wrapped up Return of the Jedi last week. We wrapped it up very quickly.
Unfortunately. We've been doing things quickly.
Yeah, I think we've bitten off a little more than we can chew in some cases.
Could be. What did we not end up covering? We
had
to cut something.
Mostly Luke. we talked about Lando, and we talked about Darth Vader and the Emperor, and then we kind of glazed over Luke.
It's like, oh, Luke's there too.
Luke did something, I think.
I mean, his character arc had already ended.
Right. It really had. Like, when we meet him at the beginning of Jedi, he is a fully formed Jedi. The title crawl tells us, and we see him the whole way through it exert exactly the effort that we would expect from a Jedi. In fact, it was either on Twitter or in the comments that someone pointed out, like, this is the Jedi that we expected to see Yoda be in the prequels. But he wasn't.
Yes. Throw your lightsaber away.
Do not fight.
Just this is where I think we're legitimate to like go back and complain and and not try and see things in Machete Order or whatever. They just ruined the Jedi in those movies. They just ruined them.
Changes. It completely changes the idea of what a Jedi is supposed to be based on what we know from the first three films.
I mean, Obi-Wan Kenobi calls a lightsaber a more an elegant weapon for a more civilized age, and then he got them like whacking away with them like thousands of Jedi. It's like, what? Don't give me that baloney.
Like everyone and their mom has a lightsaber.
Everyone has a lightsaber in those movies, and they use them constantly. And I'm sure that if they could have afforded to do that effect, and George Lucas had his way, there would have been a lot more lightsabers in the old ones, but it was expensive.
And luckily they didn't leave it open so that he could have added them later, because he probably would have tried.
Right, exactly. He would have done a Spielberg walkie-talkie kind of thing.
Yes, yeah.
Well, I think one thing that everyone probably notices is that a lot of the parodies that are out there, especially the good ones, they don't touch the new stuff. Or if they do, it's pretty underhanded and not at all. And doesn't look at it all in a good light.
Family Guy has completely ignored I think that they are set on ignoring them. They will not do a parody of any of them because how do you make a parody out of something that is already despised by such a large group of people?
Yeah, I mean, the thing about a parody is that they're done with care and love. It's like you really like something, you want to parody it. It's like nobody likes the new stuff.
Right, and definitely no one likes it the way that you can't make fun of it because it's just gonna be. It's like kicking someone when they're down.
Yeah. Well, and one of the parodies we had that I mentioned was Troops, which is a very old parody. It's from like the 90s.
This was my first viewing of it. I'd never seen it somehow. I don't know how it didn't stumble across my field of view.
And it just goes to show you that people want to be in Star Wars and in that universe, and they want to have fun in it, and they have, like, since there's been home video recording possible, that, like, there are probably more home films, and probably decent ones, that are, Star Wars related than of any other film ever.
The Star Wars Uncut thing on YouTube and on Vimeo is the perfect example of that, because so many of the 15-second clips are clearly a dad with a camcorder shooting his kids who don't even understand like exactly what they're doing. Like one kid is in a trash can and that's R2D2, and then a little girl's in a dress with like earmuffs on.
I mean, how many people have had formative life experiences pretending to be Luke Skywalker or Leia?
We know Ron never wanted to be Luke because it would have to mean he liked a girl.
Icky girls, right?
Ew, gross.
We're dealing with some serious life stuff here. I mean, I wanted to be Luke Skywalker, and then my opinions changed slightly, and I just wanted to be like a Jedi or whatever. I wanted to be an awesome Jedi.
Once you realized how big the universe was, you were like, I could fit anywhere.
Yeah, exactly. And I mean, for me, I had no, other than my, within the walls of my head, I had no, sort of creative spark to, to insert myself into the universe. So I, like many other people, desperately clung to it by buying the books and playing the video games, and you want to be a part of it.
Supporting George Lucas's criminal activities.
God, I know. If I could only go back to like 9-year-old Carter and just knock some sense into him. But I mean, if you have a camera and some time, I think it's great to insert yourself into the universe that way, and clearly a lot of people have thought the same thing, and it just speaks volumes to the depth of the work that you can get so much out of it. Have you ever? I mean, I can never say. I can't say that I can think of a time when Star Wars or Empire were on and I didn't either watch it all the way through or have to like stop myself from watching it all the way through. Yeah. I've never been like, oh, Star Wars is on. I don't matter,
It's probably more important than anything else that's on at the time. You're like, oh, well, I was going to watch this, but Star Wars is on.
Spike has made a cottage industry of selling advertisements on top of Star Wars movies.
They know who their demographic is. They're good.
Precisely. So obviously it's ripe for parody because we all love this stuff, but at the same time, it's a little ridiculous.
There are so many things that you can easily tear apart that just about every parody that I've seen makes some knock against. Like stormtroopers being stupid. That's an easy one.
Yeah, in one of the Family Guy parodies, they have like a shooting range, and it's a barn, right? And
right.
Just like can't hit it.
They can't hit the barn.
I'm thinking of Pigs in Space from the Muppet Show.
Right.
And the little sticky buttons on Miss Piggy. It's just like so many things that you can just be like, that's preposterous. And the lines are so kind of stilted but iconic. It's like they're the ability to destroy a planet, blah blah blah. How many times has that been in anything? I mean, that's been used to death.
Right.
And choking someone with the Force. That's brilliant. That was so
Robot
clever,
Chicken did this great thing where they explained that Vader actually can't choke people. They just want him to think that he can. So they actually have training missions where they demonstrate how you're supposed to appear to be choked. And then someone will come and drag you out of frame, and then they'll fit you with a disguise so that you can go back to work.
I forgot about that. Awesome.
There are lots of parody things that they don't actually parody something. They just like go beyond the scene to explain it just a little bit further. Actually, Troops was kind of that way. Like it explains Beru and Lars arriving in skeleton form in a much different way than we ever imagined happened.
I know, it's awesome.
It's a domestic dispute.
It's so great. And Beru, blows them all up. It's hysterical. And the thing that's really great about Troops is, well, you watch it now and you're like, oh my goodness, like VHS to, digital capture is not great looking.
No, not at all.
But
the top comment on the one that I watched says, 240p, we meet again.
I like that. But that goes to that delves into the culture of dressing up like stormtroopers. I'm sure there's a more technical word for what I'm talking about, but like Star Wars costume culture is like really kind of insane. Like the level of detail that people go, like they really look like stormtroopers.
Yeah, they do.
And it looks like Tatooine. And I'll say this, their set looked like Tatooine more than the Tatooine in the prequels did.
Their special effects were seamless, and it might have had something to do with the low resolution, but I couldn't tell what was CGI and what wasn't.
It's pretty great, and especially for something so old, and also for something so ridiculous. That's one of the things that I just love about these parodies, is that so many of them are done with such huge levels of care and attention. Like they're making a cops parody about stormtroopers and a domestic dispute, but it looks awesome, and they obviously spent a lot of time on it, and it shows. You can tell. Or all of the Family Guy stuff, all the Robot Chicken stuff. You could phone that in and probably get some people to watch it and make some money, but they don't. They don't do that. They sort of do the opposite of what George Lucas did with the prequels.
The people who wrote these scripts are obviously huge fans first, and then comedians second. Yeah,
exactly. Well, and that goes without saying, because a lot of nerds were influenced by Star Wars, and a lot of nerds have become stand-up comedians. I'm thinking Eddie Izzard has great material on Star Wars, and it's because he was kind of a nerd and he liked Star Wars when he was a kid, and he also happens to be a talented comedian. It's I could just go on and on and on about all of those. I just think it just makes me love them even more, and also makes me feel even more disappointed with what we got in the current era. We've had a lot of people in the comments directing us to the Clone Wars cartoon stuff, which I'm slightly interested in, but it's definitely not Star Wars.
It's definitely something else. It is Star Wars plus.
Sure, inspired by Star Wars, but it's not Star Wars.
It is. It fits in the canon, and it is Lucas approved, but it's not the same thing.
Right. I mean, I've seen some of these ones from 2003 that are look kind of like hand drawn, and I've heard really great things about the new CGI Clone Wars, but I almost can't bring myself to watch them.
I might at some time.
I don't know.
One of the parodies that I forgot about last week, and it was actually one of the earliest ones that I saw in this kind of digital era, was George Lucas in Love. Did you ever see this?
No.
It came out immediately after Shakespeare in Love and immediately after The Phantom Menace, because they both came out the same year. And it is an 8-minute short that it is a professionally done short. It looks very high quality. It is not like Troops. And it basically shows where George got the inspiration for everything in Star Wars. Literally everything. And it's all in 8 minutes. And the guy that they got to play George Lucas is a spitting image of him. I don't know if this guy went on to play anything else. I've never seen him again. But it's tremendous. And it outsold The Phantom Menace on VHS when it came out.
Holy crap, really?
Yeah.
That thing sold like crazy. I had a copy of that VHS the moment it came out. And by the way, kids, yes, it came out on VHS. I
have my copy in my closet, and it is the collector's edition, and it came with a lithograph. I am an uber nerd.
Oh yeah, me too. I got mine through I don't know what, but it was whatever I found that I could get it the absolute fastest you humanly could. And I had so much Phantom Menace crap that I have a lot of it that I've subsequently got just disposed of, because I found it years later and I was like, this is terrible.
And you realized that the value didn't hold.
No, I mean, I think I had a lithograph too or something like that, and I'm like, this is going to be really valuable one day, along with my Beanie Babies and my Pogs.
Oh God.
Jeez. So I'm really glad we didn't watch The Phantom Menace.
Me too.
Segue.
Me too.
Segue. That movie is terrible.
Yeah. Oh boy. One of the best little prequel things that is in Robot Chicken is the one where Darth Vader is hanging out, on a Star Destroyer or something, and Jar Jar just shows up, and he's like, Annie, I'm here now, and he's just annoying him, and Darth Vader has him ejected into space, and then he's going to bed at night in his Star Wars themed bed, because apparently that's what Darth Vader sleeps in. And the ghost of Jar Jar shows up all blue and shimmery, and he's like, now I can be here forever.
Oh gosh, I'm offended by Jar Jar Binks, but it's just more the way that they just completely ruined the backstory that is more offensive. I think like it's a cheap shot to say like Jar Jar Binks sucked. It's like yeah, well, yeah, of course Jar Jar Binks sucked. No one's gonna like argue that Jar Jar was like
Instrumental to
something.
the film.
Yeah, exactly. And actually, and there's a I don't think this existed before the Phantom Menace, but there is a whole online community of people who do edits of the Phantom Menace to try and make it better.
Yeah.
Fan edits.
This was one of the things that was in the Machete Order article that I read about.
Like there is one of the original fan edits cuts 20 some minutes out of the Phantom Menace. There's like no Jar Jar. It's much, there's a lot less of the stupid comedy, and apparently, and it's paced better. And apparently, it's a much better film.
I wouldn't be surprised. There is a lot of stuff in there that is a good film, and then there's a lot of fat just hanging around the edge that you're like, why didn't someone cut this? And that actually brings us to a point that we didn't mention during Machete Order, which is that George Lucas fired his editor for episode 1, and he did not hire another one until Revenge of the Sith. So that means he was probably in charge of all the editing decisions in episode 1 and episode 2.
Yeah, Shawn and I were talking about this offline. The only other editor listed on the Phantom Menace is Ben Burt, who is a sound editor.
Yeah, he did all the sound mixing. I'm sure he had nothing to do with the film editing.
And the real fact of the matter, like the reason why Machete Order works so well is that you don't need to watch the Phantom Menace. So like, I think that I dislike Attack of the Clones more than any of those movies, but the Phantom Menace is needless. It's like if you can jump right into Attack of the Clones and you don't need to have seen the Phantom Menace, it's like, well, this movie was pointless. It was a waste of 2.5 hours of your time. That's what's really horrible about it, and it makes me feel really bad.
Yeah, the article pointed out there are only a few things that really tie back to Phantom Menace because Qui-Gon Jinn is dead and gone. Darth Maul is dead and gone. They mentioned midichlorians once later that if you didn't see Phantom Menace, you might be like, what the hell are... But even if you have seen Phantom Menace, you're probably still like, what the hell are midichlorians?
Yeah, exactly. I mean, and Anakin is a totally different character, and it's the timeless love story of a 9-year-old and a 14-year-old carried across 10 years. I don't think so. I mean, they clearly were just sort of affectionate toward each other in Phantom Menace, whereas there's a romantic relationship in Attack of the Clones, and they're just like, and they just say like, oh, and they didn't see each other for 10 years. Like, what kind of plot is that? What kind of script writing is that? That's stupid. I'm really glad we did Machete Order. Mostly because I'm glad we didn't have to watch The Phantom Menace. And I think that it works. The movies in the middle are clearly very flawed. But I think that it's an interesting way to watch it, to kind of get all the big build-up and then go fill in the backstory. That's clever. And I think it's a way to kind of make you watch the prequels. Because if you say, watch Star Wars, then Empire, I immediately watched Jedi next.
Right.
And if
you couldn't even help it.
Couldn't.
It was like a reflex reaction.
Yeah. And if we hadn't been working on a project that included the prequels, I wouldn't have watched those.
Actually, one of our listeners who was doing Machete Order with us couldn't even bring himself to finish the prequels. He watched part of Attack of the Clones and was like, I don't think so. And then he didn't even watch Sith, and he just went to Jedi because he couldn't take it.
Yeah, well, I think I think he said it's like these are completely different movies. It's like, yep, they're completely different movies. They're made decades later by basically a different director. I mean, the people who made the original films a success, were not involved in the prequels. George Lucas was involved, but I don't think that. I think the more that you look into it and you think about it, he was not the reason why those movies were a success.
No, he wrote a story, and then people who were better at telling the story took it away from him and made it.
Yeah. I mean, he had that initial creative spark, like Kurosawa and World War II movies in space.
Exactly. And that is exactly what those movies are supposed to be.
Exactly. They totally work. And he was, especially for like Empire and Jedi, where he was just an executive producer, but in Star Wars certainly as well, he was that guy on the creative team who was like, let's push the visual medium further than it's been pushed before. but he had other people on the team who were making sure that it was to tell a story. You know, coming up with motion control is awesome, but if you don't have Han Solo and Luke Skywalker in the Millennium Falcon saving a princess, it's sort of like, well, what am I watching?
You just have a tech demo.
Exactly. It's like I'm watching, you know, the chase scene on Coruscant, which Dave, I think, or someone, or no, Elaine and Ron were like, I think they said they really liked those. Maybe it was Dave, I forget now. Like, really liked the chase scene, and I'm like, I can't watch that. It's just like this dizzying display of special effects. It's like, wow, I'm sure it took a lot of computers to do that. But I don't know what's going on in the scene, and I don't really care. Whereas, like, the Millennium Falcon blasting out of the Death Star, it's like, you know, you're with them right there.
You're emotionally tied to that ship.
And we mentioned this a couple of times, and I think it just really, really came out. This is probably just because I haven't seen the prequels in a long time. Using real sets is important. You can tell so easily that they're on green screens and blue screen stages in these prequels, and it just looks like crap.
I think you said on an earlier episode, the human eye is really good at picking out what is real and what's imaginary. And I could not ignore things. Like, as hard as I wanted to try and just be like, yes, they really are in the Senate chamber right now. Like, it just looks so fake.
Yeah, it looks fake. It looks fake. You just watched Alien.
I did.
That looks great.
I cannot believe how good that movie looks.
1979. That came out just a couple years after Star Wars.
I said as we were watching it, I bet the reason this movie got financed was Star Wars. And I looked on Wikipedia, and it said it had been in the pipeline for several years. And as soon as Star Wars came out, it got bumped to the front of the line.
Mm-hmm. Space movies. Let's do it.
Yep.
And, you know.
And Alien, just like the first Star Wars, does a really good job of establishing a science fiction-y universe without like pointing out everything. Like the prequels felt like it's like, oh, look at this technology. Oh, look at this thing. Look at the pod racer. Like, look at all these things. In Star Wars, it's just like, yes, this is the universe we're in it. There are lightsabers and the Force. Just deal with it. And Alien was like, yes, we're in the future. It takes 9 people to run a spaceship. That just makes sense. Duh. And we still haven't found alien life because it's really, really, really rare.
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, Alien, oh my gosh. Alien's just such a good movie. Maybe we should do those at some point. I love those movies so much. Well, I love the first 3, obviously. The 4th one and the Versus movies are terrible. It's that dirty future that, you know, that we had, you know, in Star Wars and Blade Runner. And the universe just feels lived in. That's something that I think a lot of people say about like the original Star Wars movies. Like the whole place feels like people actually live there and do stuff there. Whereas like in Star Wars, everything's like all clean and chrome, and it doesn't look like anybody uses any of the pieces of technology that are in it. You know, there's no like scorch marks, or, you know, everything's just like
everyone has obsessive compulsive disorder and cleans all the time.
Everything in those movies are like from Apple product shots, you know, like down to the micron, you know, polished, and it doesn't look real. It helps also that Alien is just like such a freaking good movie, and that Ridley Scott basically pulled the wool over all the studios' heads. They thought they were getting a sci-fi movie, and they actually got like a horror movie.
Definitely a horror film.
Oh God, of course. I think I might have to watch that too. I'm gonna have to figure this out. There's too many movies that I'm gonna have to watch based off this conversation, Sean. I would recommend Machete Order as an experiment to someone who's already seen Star Wars. I would not recommend it to someone who hasn't seen Star Wars before. Because
if they haven't seen Star Wars, what would you recommend?
Just watch the first 3.
And never watch the prequels.
Yeah. I mentioned this to Sean. This is the sort of the last thing that I have like written down that I wanted to talk about. But like if and when I have kids, we're gonna watch the first 3 movies, and I'm not gonna acknowledge that they did others until they're older, and I've indoctrinated them and like have shaped their minds to believe like this is the universe, and then I can be like, oh yeah, and they made these other movies like a long time later, and they're not really as good. You can watch them if you want, and they'll be like, oh yeah, those weren't very good, and they won't think of them as Star Wars. They're like, yeah, there were those other movies. Is that wrong?
I don't think so. I mean, if someone who I knew wanted to watch Star Wars, I would tell them there's no reason they need to watch the prequels. Machete Order was something I wanted to try, but I don't think I would recommend it to people beginning in the universe because they might run into the same problem our one listener did and just give up on the prequels. And if they do that and never make it to Jedi, they're going to be missing the conclusion of the best characters' stories.
Yeah, exactly. It's just it was an interesting experiment. I'm really glad we did it, but can't recommend it to. I would not recommend it to anyone who hasn't seen Star Wars before. Sorry to everyone who hadn't seen Star Wars before and followed along with us on this journey. I hope that you were able to realize how great the original movies are, and not dwell too much on the prequels. The prequels.
So we have our next experiment lined up, and it's a little less of an experiment and more of just like watching movies again.
Yes, and having a lot of fun, I would say.
I hope so. Christopher Nolan, the great Christopher Nolan, who turned everyone's heads with Inception last year and The Dark Knight. Was it just The Dark Knight?
The Dark Knight.
The Dark Knight, the year before that, is releasing The Dark Knight Rises this year, the final film in his Batman trilogy. And leading up to that, we are going to watch some Chris Nolan films.
We sure are. We're going to start with one of his earlier works, and one that I saw this movie when I was probably like 12 or 13, maybe 14 years old. I was probably like a freshman in high school.
Oh my God, I bet it messed you up.
Well, and also, yeah, a little bit. But also, it was like I had no taste.
Right? I know exactly what you mean.
I had no taste in movies, and I didn't know what a movie could be. But like, I thought a movie was like Star Wars or whatever. And it's just like, it just tells a story and it's fun or whatever, or it's boring. And then I see Memento and I'm like, oh my goodness. Like, not only is this a fascinating, awesome story, but it's told in this way that I couldn't have imagined that you could tell a story like this before.
Well, why would you ever think of this? Is Chris Nolan the only director who's ever done this thing?
There are other non-linear movies, but
sure.
This is such a very specific thing.
Okay, well, without giving anything away, we're watching Memento, which came out in the year 2000, right after The Matrix. I think that's when I was actually developing taste for film, was right around 2000. And Memento is told backwards. It's told scene by scene, and every scene as you watch it is after the scene that follows it. And it makes perfect sense. It makes absolutely perfect sense. You will be lost for quite a while, but by the time you get to the end, you will understand why it was told that way, and you will understand everything about the characters.
Yeah, you just leave that movie just feeling exhausted.
If you were able to understand Inception, you'll be fine with this film.
Yeah. I mean, Memento is it's a pretty simple but powerful story, and the telling of it just makes it better. If the story had been not very good, it would have been like, oh, it's a movie that's told backwards or something. But this is a good story, and I'm really excited to watch it. So
yeah, so
and
it is on Netflix streaming. You can stream it right now. Maybe you even own this movie. I actually know that I bought my mom this movie for Christmas or a birthday or something. So I might grab it on DVD.
I had a special edition of it, and I hated. We can talk about it when we talk about Memento. I hated the special edition of Memento.
Oh my goodness, I don't even know why you would.
Cliffhanger, Sean. Gotta keep them coming back.
Okay, they're hooked now.
Got a lot of midi-chlorians on this connection. 4G midi-chlorians.
They don't get that kind of reception on Tatooine.
They don't. Gotta have one of those cell repeaters.